In today's video, I'm gonna go through 7 warning signs that you may be eating too many carbs. Unlike many health influencers out there, I'm not against eating healthy carbs if it's coming from real food sources, nutrient-dense sources like fruit or carrots or different types of root vegetables. Real foods that contain carbohydrates can have some benefits for your overall health. However, so many people in our society are overindulging, over-consuming carbohydrates, causing a lot of unwanted health problems. Whenever we consume something with carbohydrates, the carbs turn into glucose in our blood. Glucose is an energy source for all the cells of our body, and so we need to get that glucose into the cell to be used as energy. And we use a hormone called insulin in order to do that. Insulin takes glucose, puts it into the cell, now it can be used for energy. The problem is when we're overdoing carbohydrates, consuming too many of them, we get too much insulin in our blood, and we get too much glucose being shoved into the cells, and so the cells actually lose their sensitivity to insulin, and now insulin can't get the glucose into the cell, so our body keeps putting out more and more insulin, and that's where the problem can occur. When we produce too much insulin, there's a lot of things that take place in our body. It drives up inflammation, it causes fat storage. Insulin is a building hormone and a storage hormone. So when insulin gets above a certain threshold and it's up there for a long period of time, it's gonna tell the cells to divide, it's gonna tell our fat cells to hold on to fat, it's going to tell the body to create as much energy as possible from what we call glycolytic energy sources, or the burning of sugar rather than the burning of fat. So we don't burn fat. And on top of that, it also causes building or growth in the body. And so we think about growth, we think about growth in our skin, growth, abnormal growth in different areas of our body. Obviously, that can cause a lot of unwanted health problems. And so here are the major warning signs that we're consuming too much carbohydrates and we have too much insulin in our blood. Number one is we're tired after meals. So we consume a meal, we're hungry, we consume a meal. Normally, we should have plenty of glucose freed up from that meal to get into the cell to drive cellular energy production. However, if we're not able to, because we have insulin resistance, we're not able to get the glucose into the cell, we feel tired, and then insulin, as insulin's elevated, higher levels of insulin reduce mitochondrial function. So we're not getting the energy we need, and our mitochondria, which are the cellular organelle that produces the energy, stops functioning at its optimal level. Like it's not gonna function as well, so we're gonna feel more tired. And we're gonna have cravings. In fact, if we're having cravings throughout the day or after a meal, so we eat a meal, and it was a good sized meal, and yet we're like, I need to have something sweet. I really want something sweet after this meal. That should not happen. That's the body saying, I need some sort of glucose because even though I ate this meal, I don't have enough glucose to get into the cell to produce energy because we're, in a sense, insulin resistant. So if you're noticing cravings throughout the day, and in particular at the end of a meal, then that's an issue. That's a sign that we're not getting the glucose into the cell. So normally you eat a meal, you should feel good, right? You shouldn't feel tired. You shouldn't feel overstimulated or energized. You should just feel normal. You should just not feel hungry and not have cravings. That's kind of the normal response. However, if you're consuming too many carbohydrates, you may notice tiredness after meals and also extra cravings. Now, those two symptoms are not exclusive to just eating carbohydrates. They can also occur if you have a food sensitivity. So if you're eating, let's say, gluten or dairy and your body doesn't digest that well and actually creates an immune response, you create more inflammation when you consume that, then sometimes you'll feel more tired, because higher levels of inflammation and oxidative stress will also reduce mitochondrial function and can also trigger cravings as well. And so that's another sign. And then also if you have low stomach acid production, if you're not producing digestive juices well, then sometimes you eat food and it puts a lot of stress on your gut because your gut's trying to do its best to produce the digestive juices, the stomach acid, bile, pancreatic enzymes, and that energy going into your digestive tract can also cause you to feel more fatigued. So that can be an issue as well. So again, it's not exclusive, but it can be a warning sign that you're eating too many carbohydrates. Number 3 is skin problems. In particular, I'm thinking of acne and skin tags and also skin pigmentation changes. And the reason for that is when we consume too many carbohydrates and we have insulin resistance, we produce an excessive amount of sebum, which is kind of the oil that comes out of our sebaceous glands in our skin. And if we produce too much oil, the right amount of oil is good. It helps keep our skin, the skin's moisture and the elasticity of the skin. However, when we produce too much of that, it can create a breeding ground for a bacterial infection. And then on top of that, the insulin resistance drives up skin inflammation. So we get too much inflammation in the skin along with the excess sebaceous or sebum production from the sebaceous glands, and we can develop acne. So acne is really commonly associated with insulin resistance, with consuming too many carbohydrates, too many processed foods. On top of that, skin tags. A lot of people have skin tags. That's a sign that we're getting too much of that message from insulin telling the skin cells to grow, 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 grow. And so we get an excessive amount of growth and we end up with these skin tags that take place. And also skin pigmentation changes. That's a sign of too much oxidative stress in the skin. When we are not burning fat well for fuel and we're burning sugar primarily, glycolytic energy source, we produce a lot of oxidative stress. Think about it when we exercise. You're exercising really intensely, you're burning mostly sugar when you're doing that because sugar can be burned in an anaerobic state. We don't need oxygen. We need oxygen to burn fat. What's a byproduct of the glycolytic energy source? It's lactic acid. And we feel this burn, right? And that's partly oxidative stress and lactic acid build up in our muscles. Now that's normal and that's totally healthy. Our body will actually create more endogenous antioxidants to buffer and protect against the oxidative stress if it's done for short bouts. But when we're doing this continuously throughout the day or after every meal that we're consuming, we're producing way too much oxidative stress. And just like an apple, if you take a bite out of an apple and you leave it exposed to the air, it will start to brown. That's oxidation. That happens to our skin or really all the organ systems of our body. So you'll see skin pigmentation changes and you'll see age spots or liver spots, they're called, on the skin where you'll have browning of the skin. It's kind of like browning of an apple. It's rusting of the body from this excess oxidative stress. So if you're noticing that, that is a warning sign that you are consuming too many carbohydrates, blood sugar imbalances, and insulin resistance. So skin problems. Number 4, trouble losing weight. Why is that? Because when we're consuming too many carbs, we have higher levels of insulin in our blood. Insulin inhibits what we call lipolysis, which is the breakdown of fatty acids. And so it inhibits or stops our body from burning fat for fuel. That's why we call it a fat storage hormone. When insulin's elevated, we're going to end up storing fat. We're not going to be able to burn fat effectively for fuel. So that's another sign, trouble losing weight. Number 5, hormone problems. When insulin's elevated, for a man, it will actually increase something called aromatase, which is an enzyme that takes testosterone and converts it into estrogen. Both of those are sex hormones, steroid hormones, testosterone and estrogen. It's fairly close in structure, and so aromatase just converts the testosterone into estrogen. And what does that ultimately lead to for a man? It's going to lead to what we call andropause, where a man has low testosterone, higher levels of estrogen in their system. And that's going to cause a lot of unwanted health problems. Lower libido, lower testosterone is really key for mental and emotional drive, right? So the drive to succeed and to accomplish goals. It helps with dopamine production, all the different neurotransmitters. So a lot of men with low testosterone, they have mood disorders, anxiety, depression, lethargy in general, low energy, fatigue, loss of muscle mass, a whole lot of unwanted problems. Prostate issues, higher risk of prostate cancer, colon cancer, a number of different cancers associated with low testosterone as well. So really big problem there. For women, it can also cause excess estrogen production or excess testosterone production depending on the woman. So when women have too much testosterone, they have a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, where they start developing cysts in their ovaries, commonly associated with too much testosterone triggered by too much insulin. So insulin, high insulin from a high carbohydrate diet was the underlying root cause, drove up testosterone, and then caused the excess growth, the cyst formation in the ovaries. And then PCOS, there's a lot of association between PCOS and acne, right? Again, kind of similar cause, insulin resistance. Now, other women will develop endometriosis because they'll get an imbalance of estrogen to progesterone. And endometriosis is often associated with too much estrogen in the system, again, driven by too much insulin and too much aromatase activity in the blood. And so for women, again, they're going to develop all different types of hormonal issues, PMS issues oftentimes associated with this, infertility, right? A lot of different issues associated with high insulin and high blood sugar from eating too many carbs. Number 6 is frequent thirst. So if you're noticing you're thirsty all the time, glucose, when it goes into the cells, it also goes in with water. And so we end up retaining more water, and it will actually bring sodium. So when we have higher blood sugar and high insulin, we retain sodium and we retain water in our system. And so we need to consume more in that case. Also, when we have high blood sugar, we know the sugar molecules can be toxic to our system. So when we have high blood sugar, the sugar molecules will bind to proteins in our blood and create something called an advanced glycation end product. And those advanced glycation end products, otherwise known as AGEs, will actually damage the endothelial lining of the blood vessels and create inflammation in the blood vessels. And so one way the body tries to deal with high blood sugar is it tries to pee it out, tries to get it out in the urine. And so we can oftentimes have increased thirst and increased urination when we have high blood sugar and high insulin. So that's another common issue. And then number 7 is high blood pressure and high triglycerides. I talked about how we retain sodium and we create more blood volume when we have high insulin and high blood sugar. And that's ultimately, the more blood volume we have, the more our blood pressure goes up. Now, we need a certain amount of blood volume. We should have a normalized blood pressure somewhere around 110 to 130 systolic to, let's say, 70 to 90 diastolic. But when we're retaining all this sodium and all this water and we're creating all this blood volume, that's going to increase the pressure in our blood vessels. On top of that, high blood sugar, again, creating these advanced glycation end products, we're damaging the internal lining of the blood vessels, and the blood vessels start to lose their elasticity, their ability to bend and flex. So they become rigid because they've got scar tissue there, and they're not able to bend and flex with the beat of the heart. So when the heart beats and we get more blood flow going through, we should be able to flex, and that reduces the pressure. If the blood vessel stays basically the same length because it's lost that elasticity, it's going to increase the pressure in the blood vessel, which ultimately can cause a lot of unwanted health problems and increase our risk of heart disease, all different types of cardiovascular complications, stroke, dementia risk goes up, Alzheimer's, because it's harder to get blood up against gravity up into the brain. So the brain cells don't get the oxygen, nutrients they need, so we can develop a lot of cognitive issues and neurodegenerative types of issues. So really big problems here associated with eating too many carbs. And so again, I'm not against eating carbs. I do it myself. I really enjoy fruit. Occasionally I'll eat, starchy vegetables, things like that. Couple things with that. If you're going to eat carbs on a regular basis, you're going to eat a good amount of carbs, let's say more than like 50 grams of net carbs, so total carbs minus fiber in a day. If you're going to do that, make sure you're exercising. In fact, one of the best things you can do is, and this is really the best time, is to actually eat carbohydrates either right before you exercise, and that could just be taking a walk, right? It doesn't have to be high intensity exercise. I typically prefer doing high intensity exercise in more of a fasted state where I've been fasting for at least 4 hours, ideally overnight. I like to exercise at a high intensity fasted, but then after the exercise, your GLUT4 receptor, which actually acts like insulin, it's a receptor in the cell, and it actually takes glucose and pulls it in and drives it into the mitochondria where it can be used for energy, or into the cell, into the cytoplasm, where it can be used for energy. And so that GLUT4 protein transporter is elevated, its activity is increased when we exercise. And so now we can clear our bloodstream with lower amounts of insulin. So we don't need to produce as much insulin. That keeps our cells very insulin sensitive. So the worst time to eat a high carbohydrate meal is actually early in the morning when you haven't moved. If you're doing that, that can actually cause a lot of problems. It's going to actually set you up for cravings and all different types of issues. Now, the best time I would say would be like late afternoon or early evening. That would be a great time to consume your carbs. Ideally, you've exercised at some point during the day, and then you can actually increase the utilization of that glucose and lower your blood sugar by taking a walk after you eat, or maybe doing some dancing or playing with your kids in some sort of active way, and that will help increase the glucose utilization and lower the overall insulin levels. So activity is super key here for helping make your cells more insulin sensitive and reducing these symptoms, and then obviously modulating how many carbohydrates you're consuming on a regular day. Okay, unless you're really a high-level athlete, I don't think there's really any reason to consume more than 100 to 150 grams of net carbs, total carbs minus fiber in a day. And instead, really prioritize protein. I recommend getting 30 to 50 plus grams of protein in a meal, 30 at the minimum, 50 or more grams of protein depending on how much strength training you're doing, how much lean body mass you have, and your goals as far as muscle building. You may need more protein than that, okay? But 30 ideally at the minimum. Unless you're very small or you're a child, then you might be able to get away with, let's say, 20 grams of protein in a meal. If you're under, let's say, 120 pounds or so, you might do 20 to 25 grams. Otherwise, you're over 120 pounds. Ideally, try to stick with that 30-gram threshold per meal, and then combine that with healthy fats, getting 15 to maybe 30 or more grams of healthy fats coming from things like extra virgin olive oil, avocados, grass-fed meats, wild-caught fish, pasture-raised eggs, coconut oil or coconut milk, grass-fed dairy, something along those lines where you're getting your healthy fats. And if you do that, if you focus on the protein and the healthy fats, and the carbs come in as just kind of like a topping, like getting a lot of multicolored fruits and vegetables in your meal, that's going to provide some carbohydrates, some fiber, lots of phytonutrients. It's going to make your meal really taste great. And it's going to provide carbohydrates, but not an excessive amount of carbohydrates to cause unwanted problems. The protein and fat will help reduce cravings, will help you feel satiated and be able to go longer without food and actually feel really, really good. And if you do that, you're going to be able to get rid of any type of symptoms like this or avoid them altogether and really optimize your metabolic health. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this training. We will see you guys in a future video training. Be blessed.